Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The following program is a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and a proud member of the Simply Scary Podcast Network. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com to learn more about this and our other weekly storytelling programs, and become a patron today to show your support and get instant access to our extensive archive of downloadable tales of terror. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show. Disclaimer: Horror Hill is a horror anthology podcast bringing you scary stories from all corners of the internet and beyond. As such, certain stories include content that some listeners might find offensive. Listener discretion is advised. Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome back to Horror Hill. I'm Erik Peabody, your host and narrator. Now, you might have already looked at the length of this episode and done a double take, but rest assured, the creeping madness of the holiday season hasn't finally snapped your poor, overstrained mind. No, escape from holiday obligations is only for the dead, but all of us here at Horror Hill decided to give you a bit of a breather from the Yuletide chaos screaming at you from every angle. And so, from the Horror Hill team and author Travis Brown, here's a different kind of insanity. Tonight's tale is The House with 100 Doors, and is the centerpiece in Travis's collection of the same name. In this story, we meet Aaron, a freelance writer and one of 4 guests invited to a very strange tour of a very strange house. Our host is the mysterious Doc, and he's made some odd requests of our guests. Most house tours don't require equipment for an entire weekend, and they certainly don't require a copy of your will. But famous eccentrics are certainly entitled to their little tics, and there's no way that a house can really have 100 doors, right? You're listening to the free edition of this program. If you'd like to help support Horror Hill and also remove these pesky ads, head to chillingtalesfordarknights.com and click Patrons in the upper menu to sign up today. You'll get instant access to hundreds of ad-free stories, so what are you waiting for? Also, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor and drop a like and subscribe. Become part of our dark circle, listeners. And now, from author Travis Brown, I give you The House with 100 Doors.
After the first door, the next room is always random. I've never seen any rhyme or reason to it, but there are certain consistencies to watch out for as we go. Bathrooms and kitchens are usually safe. The attic is bad. The basement's worse. Bedrooms are okay if they're empty, not so much if they're occupied. And if you open a door and the room on the other side has yellow walls, slam the fucking door shut. Any questions?
Every hand in the parlor went up.
Yeah, said our host. I had a hunch there would be some questions.
There were 5 of us sitting in the large, plush room. Our host, Doc, went through a lot of trouble recreating an authentic English drawing room in what was, from the outside, a cookie-cutter American McMansion built too big for its neighborhood. The place wasn't huge, but it rose above the rest of the houses on the street like a tiger over tall grass. The rest of Doc's house, as much as I'd seen so far, was as odd as the man himself. We'd had a midnight dinner in a dining room dominated by a beautiful slab of oak table that probably cost more than my first car. Around 2 a.m., we retired to the parlor to drape ourselves over soft leather couches and plush maroon chairs. We'd had dark red wine with dinner and brandy with dessert, and I was riding a fine buzz as Doc finally got us ready for the main event. We were about to take a tour of a house full of moving rooms and hidden horror. At least, that was the pitch Doc made in his email to me the week before. I rated the whole offer as 12 gallons of bullshit and a 10-gallon hat, but my curiosity was ever getting the best of me. Plus, it's not every day that a famous weirdo like Doc invited me to a party. I turned my attention away from my diminishing glass of liquor back to the group. Doc had wheeled in a big whiteboard, messily sketching out what looked like a cross between floor plans and a corn maze.
"It's not haunted, not exactly,"
Doc explained to the pair of guests closest to him.
"The house just exists in different places at different times. Everything on the first floor always stays rooted to the here and now, but the second floor is less stable. Furniture will be in one place at night and another in the morning. Paintings tend to change from week to week. But the real strangeness happens if you take the door leading up to the attic."
"Let me guess," said Josh, a pudgy 20-something who ran a popular horror blog and podcast. "The door that goes to the attic doesn't really lead to the attic, right?" Doc shrugged.
"It does, eventually. That small blue door at the end of the hall is a fixed point, but the location of the attic is inconsistent. It usually shows up within the first dozen rooms, but I've gone entire trips without seeing it."
"Just how many rooms does the house have exactly?" asked Holly. She was a workhorse like me, a writer who eked out a living doing freelance work and submitting anything not nailed down to the lit mags and pulp anthologies. "The invitation said tour the house with 100 doors, so not counting front, back, that's like 98 rooms?" suggested Dodger. Next to Doc, Dodger was probably the most famous of the five of us, an indie horror movie darling who directed one brilliant film and 4 mediocre ones. Dodger was his stage name, and it fit him well. Tall and wire-thin, he was constantly in motion. He paced along the enormous bookshelves, plucking out a title here and there, boots whisking softly across posh red rugs. Doc stood up and moved to the center of the room to address all of us.
"So, the house with 100 doors is a bit of a misnomer. The truth is, I don't know how many rooms reside within this house. Could be 100 or 1,000 or an infinite parade of perpetual doors. Personally, the farthest I've gone is 61 doors."
"So why say 100? I asked. Doc shrugged.
"I liked the alliteration. There's a simple kind of... Stop!" he snapped. "Not that one."
Dodger froze, fingers wrapped around a massive black book he'd half extracted from its shelf. Even from across the room, I could make out silver lettering scrimshawed down the spine of the tome.
"You can read any book in here except for that one," Doc told Dodger. "Please, put it back."
Dodger raised one thin eyebrow, but did as Doc asked. "Another one of your rules, eh?" asked Dodger. Our host smiled and glanced at the clock.
"There are only 2 more to go over before we start. The first being, don't look for it."
"Look for what?" Josh began, falling silent as we all heard it. There was a faint whistling outside. It grew steadily louder. The whistler was coming closer. "What the hell?" Dodger asked, moving from the bookshelf towards the window.
"Stop!"
Doc demanded, voice like a bear trap. Dodger obeyed, but turned to Doc, fists clenched. I got the impression the young filmmaker wasn't used to taking orders. I decided to pour myself another drink and reacquaint myself with the glass. "What is it?" Dodger asked.
"I don't know," Doc replied. "I've never looked."
"Why not?"
"Because when I moved in, my neighbors made it very clear that the whistling would come every night, but I should never look."
Dodger looked perplexed. "You just took them at their word?"
"They were very convincing."
After a few minutes, the whistling moved past us, then stopped entirely. "Weird," muttered Josh. I silently agreed, finishing my drink and refilling the glass. We all sat quietly for a few moments. "So, what's the final rule?" Holly asked.
"It has to do with the rooms we pass through," Doc explained, "and it's a two-part rule. Some of the rooms will require that we complete a task before moving on. Whenever we encounter a locked door, that means there's a task. The rules for each locked door will be different, but also immediately clear. Now, certain rooms will be occupied. The final rule is this: if an occupant asks you a question, you have to answer, and you have to answer truthfully." Dodger walked past Doc and plopped down on the couch next to Holly. "Tasks, questions, rules," Dodger said, ticking off his fingers one by one. "This is feeling a little formulaic, I have to say." "There have to be rules, Dodger. Rules and consequences," said Doc. "Can't have an adventure without 'em. Can't run blindly into the great unknown without a line to hold on to. Rules are like rails, Dodger. Follow them and you'll have a good trip."
"Rails are safe. Rails are boring. I've always been a fan of forging new paths," said Dodger. Doc grinned, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, drying up somewhere along the climb.
"That's your decision to make when you're on your own time. But as long as you're on my tour, you'll follow the rules. Speaking of, are we ready?"
There was a general murmur of confirmation. I topped off my glass and drained it in a quick slug. I felt the warmth settle in my bones. A lazy focus was blossoming behind my eyes. I debated one more for the road, but Holly was giving me an odd look, so I erred on the side of sobriety. Besides, I'd packed a bottle of Jim Beam and a second backup bottle in case of an emergency. I wasn't sure how long our tour would take, but Doc told us to pack like we were going away for the weekend.
"Let's get going then," Doc said.
Everyone rose and stretched. We began shuffling towards the foyer, where we'd all deposited our backpacks and supplies. Outside of the parlor, the house was oddly quiet. There was no whispering from a forgotten TV, no ticking of distant clocks, not even the sound of footsteps, since the hall was filled by a maroon rug roughly as thick as Amazonian undergrowth. I looked at the silent clock on the foyer wall. It was 3:10 a.m. I yawned, suddenly aware that I really needed to take a leak.
"Everyone packed all of the items on the list I sent you, right?" Doc asked. "We're all big boys and girls, so I'm not going to check."
We all nodded. Doc gave a finger gun gesture towards the staircase.
"Okay, let's ride. Wait, before we go, I almost forgot. Does everybody have those documents I requested?"
4 manila envelopes were handed over. As part of our invitation, Doc requested I bring a basic bio and a copy of my most recent will. An off-putting request for sure, but I'd obliged. We didn't discuss what was in the envelopes as we gave them to Doc, but I assumed he'd made an identical request of each of us. Doc pulled a folded envelope of his own, placed it on top of the pile, and left all 5 packets on a small table next to the staircase.
"Just in case," was all he said.
Doc began to walk up the stairs. Shrugging on our packs, the 4 of us followed. I was struck with the absurd image of this being a childish camping trip, the kind where you and a few of your friends pitch a tent in your backyard. We trotted after Doc, a knockoff fellowship skeptical about the trip ahead. At the top of the stairs, we came upon an expansive open area, everything covered in dark walnut and expensive rugs. There were sculptures and artwork on the wall at regular intervals. I thought about Doc's claim about how the paintings had a tendency to change. They seemed normal enough at the moment, but I couldn't stop myself from looking for some imperceptible sign of movement from the pictures as we passed. We reached the small door Doc had mentioned. It was robin's egg blue. The door was barely 6 feet tall. Dodger would need to hunch down to pass through. Without saying a word, Doc opened the door and stepped through. The 4 of us remaining shared a collective look, then we followed him through the first door. Like its entrance, the room we were in was unremarkable. The space was small, dimly lit, walls white and floor bare wood. I couldn't tell if it was a loft or mudroom or just a small, empty bedroom. The small blue door clicked shut behind us after we were all in, seemingly of its own. The first piece of weirdness, then, not counting the whistling. "Springs?" Josh asked, looking back at the closed door. Doc only grinned. A red door, average in every way, stood in the center of the wall opposite where we entered.
"This is the first major step of the night,"
Doc told us, gesturing towards the red door.
"This room is always here. That," he pointed at the blue door, "is always there. But after this room, I don't know where each new door will lead. Usually, the first few rooms are pretty harmless, and the same things show up consistently. But you never know."
Doc walked back to the blue door.
"If anyone has second thoughts, this will take you back to the second floor of the house and you can leave from there. The blue door will follow us as we go. Each room, no matter how strange, will have its own blue door back to the normal world. It's just sometimes the door is, hidden, but it's always there, somewhere."
Doc pulled the blue door open.
"If this sounds too bizarre for anyone, now is the perfect time."
He was cut off by the gentle screech of the door closing on its own again. Doc's face cycled through surprise, confusion, and abject terror within a handful of moments.
"That's not supposed to happen,"
I heard him whisper. The tendons in his forearms stood out like bridge cables as he strained to keep the blue door open, but the door continued its slow grind back towards the wall. Doc shifted his grip away from the doorknob. He had both hands on the edge of the door now, leaning back against the unseen force moving the hinges. He made himself an anchor against inevitability. Suddenly, the door went from closing in a lazy arc to slamming shut. Doc fell back, tripped, and landed hard on the floorboards. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. There were red splotches all over Doc's sweater, his pants, the floor. And when he held up his shaking hands, I saw why. The abrupt, irresistible snap of the door meeting its frame had severed the tips off of all of his fingers on both hands. Except for his thumbs, each digit now ended in an ugly pink pulp just above the second knuckle. We stood frozen, staring down at him. But Doc wasn't looking at his hands. He was gawking at the door.
"That's not supposed to happen,"
I heard him whisper again. I turned to where Doc's eyes were fixed and felt a groan crawl out of my throat. The blue door was gone, replaced by a blank white wall. Holly was the first to shake herself into action. She slid off her pack and tore through the contents, emerging with a first aid kit. Moving quickly, Holly began disinfecting each of Doc's injured fingers before wrapping them in gauze and medical tape. The rest of us stood around awkwardly. Josh was staring down at Doc's hands, Dodger glaring forward at the blank wall where the door used to be. I wasn't looking anywhere in particular, just ahead in a haze, wondering if drinking the bourbon in my bag would improve or deteriorate the situation. I decided that I didn't care and brought the bottle out. Holly's small hands were swift and efficient. "Can we help?" Dodger asked. Holly shook her head. "I've got it." I sat down to watch her work. Dodger and Josh joined me. I passed the bottle around. Holly even spared a moment to take a swig. We all sat on the bare hardwood floor, watching Holly. It felt a little awkward, Dodger, Josh, and me all huddled together, while Holly wrapped Doc's fingers all by herself. Dodger cleared his throat. "You're, very good at that," he told Holly. She nodded tersely, but didn't look up from her work. "Where did you learn?" Dodger trailed off, probably realizing his small talk was only a distraction. "The Army," Holly replied, eyes never leaving Doc's hand. "I was a medic.
"Oh God!"
Doc suddenly shouted, snapping out of his daze.
"Oh God! Shit!"
He ripped one partially bandaged hand away from Holly and held it in front of his face. There was a distressing amount of empty space where his fingertips should be. Doc began to struggle. "Help me!" Holly said, trying to hold Doc down as he thrashed. Before Dodger or I could move, Josh was up, kneeling next to Doc. Josh caught Doc's flailing arm by the wrist and firmly, gently, lowered it to his side. "It's okay," Josh said, his other hand on Doc's shoulder. "Relax, you're safe. You're safe." Josh had one of the most calming voices I'd ever heard. Doc's thrashing lessened, stopped. He went limp, sagging into Josh, who put an arm under Doc's gray-haired head. "You're okay," Josh repeated. "We're okay." Holly gave Josh a nod of thanks and went back to bandaging Doc. Dodger and I exchanged a sheepish look, and I passed him back the bottle. We were about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Holly finished wrapping and snipped the medical tape off with a pair of angular scissors. She went back to her rucksack and rummaged around, returning with a small vial and syringe. "I'm going to give you something for the pain," Holly told Doc, rolling up his blood-soaked sleeve past his elbow. He didn't reply as she injected him, only stared mutely at the wall where the little blue door used to be.
"It wasn't supposed to be like this,"
Doc mumbled. After a few minutes, his breathing became shallow and his eyes closed. Doc was sleeping. Josh gently extracted himself, fetched his backpack, and propped it under Doc's head as a makeshift pillow. Holly exhaled deeply, then put her kit back in her bag. "Oh, fuck," Dodger muttered, glancing around the tight room. 4 blank white walls surrounded us with only a single red door to break the pattern. The floor was cold, the ceiling low, and I desperately needed to take a leak. "Yeah, fuck," Holly agreed, sitting down. Dodger moved in the opposite direction, standing and stretching long limbs towards the ceiling. I cleared my throat. "Hey, I feel awkward about this, but I forgot to use the restroom before we got started. All the excitement, you know. And, 1 or 2, Holly asked. "Just 1, I replied. She nodded, reaching into her bag, then tossing me an empty Gatorade bottle. "You really are prepared," I mumbled, slinking off to the corner. We all found ways to kill time while Doc slept. I knew we'd eventually need to walk through that red door. None of us were eager to take the plunge without our guide, though. Holly rested near Doc, her eyes closed. I wasn't sure if she was sleeping or just decompressing. Dodger was pacing back and forth, walking along each wall over and over. He was scowling, and his caged animal vibes were making me a little anxious. Josh, on the other hand, remained a calming influence. The two of us sat quietly on the floor near Doc, the bourbon between us. "Do you think this is real?" Josh asked. The image of the door closing on Doc's fingers popped into my mind like a boil. "Feels real," I replied. I couldn't help but picture Doc's severed fingertips lying in a jumble like fallen Jenga pieces on the other side of the wall. Eventually, Dodger joined us sitting on the floor, not saying much. Doc began stirring not long after. He tried to pull himself up, but winced when his hand touched the floor.
"We need to start moving,"
Doc said groggily. Holly gently pressed him back down. "You need to rest." "He needs to tell us what the fuck's going on," Dodger said. Doc shook his head, seemingly punch-drunk.
"I don't know. This hasn't happened before. The blue door never goes away this early. Something's wrong. I'm sorry, I don't know what, but something's different this time."
Dodger shook his head. "Bullshit!" Doc held up his 2 disfigured hands.
"If this was a prank or joke, Dodger, I would have picked a better punchline."
We all sat squirming for a bit.
"Help me up?"
Doc asked. Josh and I looked at Holly. When she nodded, we moved to Doc. He was shaky on his feet, clearly still feeling the effects of blood loss or whatever Holly had given him, but he looked determined.
"Okay. I'm going to go first. Follow single file and stick together."
"Maybe I should go first," Holly suggested. Doc glanced down at his bandaged hands.
"Yeah," he admitted. "Doorknobs might be an issue, but I'll be right behind you. Then Dodger, then Aaron. Josh, you bring up the rear."
Holly took a deep breath and approached the red door. She tried the knob. It seemed to turn cleanly. The door swung open. From where I was standing in the back, it looked like another bare room, similar to an unfinished apartment with no furniture. Instead of white walls with a red door, there were blue walls with a brown door across from us.
"Here goes nothing,"
Holly said. We made it through the first room without incident, then the second, then the third. Not all of the rooms were bare. The fifth room we passed through was a tasteful, if small, bedroom. All blue pillows and modern furniture. It looked like an ad from IKEA. The eighth room had shag carpets and no furniture, only a ping-pong table in the center and a few folding metal chairs pressed against the wall. The 14th room was a home office dominated by a huge wooden desk in the corner with cream-colored walls and a ceiling fan rotating lazily above us. No one said it, but it quickly became obvious that even if we were somehow turning in circles, there was no way the house was large enough to contain so many rooms. Nothing about any of the rooms stood out as alarming. However, the farther we pressed on, the more small oddities I noticed. Some of the floors felt a few inches off of even. Walls were occasionally asymmetrical, with one side just barely shorter than the other three. But the art on the walls stood out the most. Moving through a bedroom, we passed by a picture of a family at a park. The painting itself was quite lovely, all pastel greens and sun-swept meadows. However, the faces of the family all looked manic, wide-eyed, completely at odds with the serenity of the scene. In the 19th room, we came to a tall gray door. This room was colder than any of the others so far, and when Holly turned the knob, we found ourselves facing a dim, narrow hallway. Holly hesitated. "This one feels weird," she said. "They all feel fucking weird," Dodger replied. "We don't seem to have many options," I said. "We can't really go back." Holly began walking down the hallway, and we followed. The farther we progressed, the darker and cooler the hall became. My arm brushed against one of the walls, and I was surprised how rough and damp it felt. "It's like a tunnel," I heard Josh whisper behind me. "Or a cave," I thought. "It's getting darker," Holly said. "Flashlights out." We stopped for a few moments to dig lights out of our packs. 5 beams of blue bright lights snapped to life, one after another. The flashlights were a comfort, but they weren't providing as much illumination as they should. Something about the shadows in the hallway resisted, clinging stubbornly to the floor, walls, and ceiling. It was hard to see more than a dozen or so yards in front of us, so it caught everyone off guard when we came to the first bend in the hallway. It was a shallow curve and uneven. This didn't seem like anything that was built or measured. The hall was more like some imperfect path you'd find in nature. "It's getting tighter," Dodger said, reaching up one hand and managing to touch his fingertips to the ceiling. After passing the first bend, the walls began to feel narrower, their sides rougher. The floor also had a slight, steady decline now. We passed a second bend, then a third, and then we came upon a sudden, steep rise in the floor that we had to climb over. The space we had to maneuver in continued to shrink. It was a good thing we were moving in a single file because soon enough my shoulders were nearly rubbing the sides of the hall with each step. I've always been mildly claustrophobic. MRIs made me sweaty, and I avoided the crawl space under my house like it was an X at a party. But this was something different. Worse. I forced myself to swallow down the ember of panic trying to ignite in my throat. Up ahead, I heard Holly curse, and we all stopped. It was so dark now that everyone around me was a shadowy outline with blurred features, even with our flashlights. "We need to turn back," Holly said from the front. "It gets tight up ahead, and there's a sharp, blind bend. I think it's only big enough to wiggle through. We should go back." Only big enough to wiggle through, I thought. That ember of panic was a steady burn now, and I could feel cold sweat all over my body. "If we go back, we're just spinning our wheels," Doc said. "Better to spin our wheels than risk," I began. "Doc's right," Dodger cut me off. "I still think there's something deeply fucked about this whole situation, but there's no point in going backward. We've been through those rooms already. We know there's no door back, no way out. So unless everyone wants to play ping pong for the next 25 years, I think we need to press on. Can't we just go back and call the cops? I asked. At least one of the rooms back there has internet.
Even if you could connect a call, which I'm not sure the house would allow, Doc said. And even if the police burst through that little blue door at the start with a full SWAT team, there's very little chance they'd ever find us. The rooms wouldn't be in the same order if anyone came in behind us.
How can you know? Josh asked. Doc shrugged.
Because I've tried before, with others, more than once. Each path is different. The house is never set. I'm sorry, there's only one direction we can go.
We all stood silently for a moment.
Balls,
said Holly. We'll have to leave the packs. This was met with murmurs and curses, but we could all plainly see there was no room for the large bags. The 5 of us stuffed as many essentials as we could into our pockets. I saw Holly's flashlight dip as she turned sideways. Okay, one at a time and stay close. If anyone gets stuck, the person in front of them pulls, the person behind pushes. Holly's light disappeared as she slipped into the fissure. I didn't exhale until I heard her give the all clear from the other side. One by one, we followed. When it was my turn, it took every ounce of self-control I had to shimmy my way through the narrow bend. The rough walls pressed close, forcing me to work one shoulder through, then drag the rest of my body along. I held my breath and pushed. For one horrible second, I felt wedged in. Then Dodger's hand reached back and closed around my wrist, pulling me forward. At the same time, I felt Josh behind me nudging me forward with his shoulder. I exited the crevice like a popped cork. Doc and Dodger both reached in to help Josh squeeze through. Josh tore his shirt badly. There was a little more room on this side of the bend, but the way forward was even darker. As we pushed ahead, the walls became tighter and tighter until it was worse than before. The ceiling was dropping and the floor was rising. Soon, Dodger had to hunch over to walk, and then we were all hunched. Fuck, 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 I whispered to myself, trying to push down the claustrophobia.
There's another crevice ahead, Holly called back. Just the same as before, okay? We got this. One at a time.
It took much longer for Holly to give us the all clear after she went in.
Be careful, she called back, sounding winded. It's a real mess. I had to crawl. There's gonna be a gradual climb, then a hard left, then a sharp drop out of fucking nowhere, and finally a short hook like a J shape at the end. It's a squeeze. Just keep moving.
I was having a hard time swallowing. Holly was petite, short, and maybe 115 pounds. If she thought it was a squeeze, the rest of us were in trouble.
Hey, I see the door! It's right here! Holly called back, excited. We're almost through!
I watched Doc disappear into the shadows of the bend. Dodger waited before following. Even in the dark, I could see his hand shaking. I took a deep breath, sucked in my chest and gut, and began to push through. If the first bend was a nightmare, this second passage was a tight knot of hell. I could feel the walls pressing against me, forcing me to take shallow breaths. There was no room to turn around, no leeway. I was quickly forced to my hands and knees as the space constricted. When I came to the rise Holly mentioned, I had to drop to my stomach to pinch through. The corridor felt like it had its own unique gravity, crushing and heartless. I began to hyperventilate, face mashed against unyielding stone. All I could do was force myself forward inch by inch, stomach on the ground with the top of the tunnel brushing against my back. I had to contort my body as much as possible to keep moving when the passage curved left. My heartbeat sounded like a panicked crowd running in my ears. I wiggled my shoulders past the turn, both arms scraping painfully until I managed to twist partially on my side in a corkscrew. This allowed me to sneak beyond the bend, but pinned my left arm, the one holding the flashlight. The dark ahead was complete. I felt for the drop Holly mentioned with my free arm, and gasped when I found how steep it was. Without my light, I couldn't see how far the decline dropped or how tight it would get. I began to tremble, frozen. My body ached from crawling, my arm was cramping, and the pressure from the walls made it hard to breathe. All I wanted to do was back up to more open spaces. Fuck it, I would play ping pong for the rest of eternity if it was somewhere I could take a full fucking breath. I tried to inch forward and felt my shoulder wedged tightly against the wall. I was trapped. Oh Christ, oh God, I thought. Hey, are you okay? Holly's voice came bobbing out of the darkness. No, I replied. I was crying. I'm stuck. Oh God, I think I'm stuck. Help! Help! Fucking help, please! My breathing was so rapid I was worried I was having a heart attack. Calm down, Aaron. Relax. Relax, Holly told me. Listen to my voice. Do you hear me? Yes, I whimpered. Okay. It's not going to feel comfortable, but I need you to push all of your air out, Holly continued. Make yourself small. Where are you? Are you at the drop yet? Yes. That's good. That's good, Holly said. You're almost there. You're doing great. The passage opens up after the drop, Aaron. Just keep moving. No flashlight, no room. All I had to latch onto was her voice. Just keep moving. I grabbed onto my panic, wrestled it, and shoved as much of it as I could into a little mental lockbox. It wouldn't hold it for long, but it might hold it long enough. Exhale, inhale, exhale as hard as I could. I let my air out and tried to drag myself forward. It wasn't enough. I was stuck. In the second before I could inhale to scream, I felt pressure on my foot. Josh, I thought. Hold on, he said. 3, 2, 1, push. I threw myself forward as hard as I could. At the same time, Josh shoved me from behind. I was shocked at how strong he was. For an endless moment, I stayed in place, caught in the grip of the tunnel. Then there was a yanking pain in both arms, and I was moving. The drop was deep and sudden, but wider as well. I managed to wrench my left arm free from my side, and I was crawling. There was a terrifying moment at the end of the slide when I came to the hook, a small stone lip that I had to climb up, bent in an awkward position. The panic got out of its box, and I started screaming, thrashing. But I was able to twist so that my upper body was in the lip. Luckily, I was close enough that I could see the glimmer of a flashlight. Strong hands reached down, and I grabbed for them. Doc and Dodger pulled me out. My chest and back were scraped to pieces, but I was out. All I could do was collapse on the ground and pant. It was several minutes before I collected myself enough to look over and see Holly, Doc, and Dodger huddled together, shining their flashlights into the passage's opening. Josh wasn't out yet. Shakily, I stood up and joined them. The tunnel carried sound strangely, and I could hear the echo of sobbing. Josh, you're almost through, Holly called out. We're here. Come closer and we'll pull you the rest of the way. Josh's voice came back strained. I can't. It's too tight. I'm stuck. Oh, God, please, someone help. I shuddered. The taste of that particular horror was still fresh for me. Josh had it worse, though. He was larger than I was, heavier, and there was no one behind him to push. The sobbing suddenly turned to screaming. Josh? Dodger yelled. What's wrong? I can't back up! I can't back up! No! He barely sounded human with the distortion of the cave and the hysteria in his voice. Please, help! Please, someone come get me, please! Doc leaned as far into the opening as he could. Josh, calm down. You need to focus. Fuck you! Josh screamed back. I couldn't really blame him. You can hate me if you want, Doc replied gently. But hate me once you're out.
The house, it reacts to extreme emotions. It reacts in unpredictable ways.
You could have fucking mentioned that before, Doc, Dodger whispered.
I didn't want to alarm anyone.
Consider us alarmed, Dodger spat back.
Please!
Josh's scream was something primal, the desperation of an animal in a trap.
Please, come get me! It's getting tighter! Why is it getting tighter?
If the house reacts to extreme emotions, Josh's panic must have been blood in the water. I'm going to try, Holly said. Someone hold my legs. Dodger nodded and stood ready. But it didn't matter. Holly couldn't squeeze back in. What the hell? She said. I made it out fine.
It's getting tighter, Doc said. The house is reacting.
Josh stopped screaming.
Is someone coming? He begged. Please. I'm sorry. I'm stuck. I'm sorry.
We can't, Dodger said. Not yet. We will, though. Just calm down. The house will ease up. A long silence.
I don't want to die.
I could barely hear Josh.
It's so hard to breathe, he said. I don't want to die here.
You won't, Dodger yelled. We'll be there soon. Hold steady.
It's getting harder to breathe, Josh gasped. Please.
Dodger turned away from the passage. God damn it.
Aaron,
Josh called.
Aaron, is this real?
No, I lied. No, we're not really here. Josh, we're in a pub in Baltimore, okay?
Okay,
he replied weakly. Listen, this is the best pub in the city. I know this place well. We're at the bar. Josh, do you hear me?
Yeah, Aaron, I hear you.
He was so quiet. Then his voice came back loud, raw.
I don't want to die here.
We're at the bar, I insisted. We're having a drink, telling ghost stories and dirty jokes. This isn't real. It was hard to keep my voice from cracking. We're not really here. The silent moments stretched longer and longer. Josh was alternating between mumbling and crying. I heard him call the name Jennifer.
I'm sorry, Jen,
Josh said.
I'm sorry. We'll sort it. Fix it. We'll be okay. Jennifer, this isn't real. I don't want to die here.
I knew being stuck in the dark, oxygen deprived, could make people hallucinate. I hoped whatever phantoms Josh was seeing gave him some comfort. They were the only company he had up there. I kept checking my watch, time crawling by in glowing blue numerals. After 20 minutes, Josh wasn't screaming anymore or talking, but we could still hear him breathing, starving for air. Nearly 40 minutes after I'd started counting, we didn't hear any sounds at all from the passage. We waited another hour, Holly and Dodger trying every few minutes to find a way back into the tunnel. But it was no use. The house never relaxed or relented. The opening stayed swollen nearly shut. Doc was the first of us to turn away from the hallway and towards the door. This door was yellow, with a copper border and matching knob. Not yet, Dodger said. Doc sighed and shook his head. He used both of his damaged hands to turn the knob and opened the door. The three of us hesitated, and then Holly and I silently followed. Dodger was the last to leave, but he didn't linger once the rest of us left. The yellow door led us into a large, cozy kitchen. Holly gave Doc some more, I think, morphine, and changed his bandages. Crawling through the passage did a real number on his fingers. Holly kept pacing around the room, checking and rechecking every cabinet. There was no food in the kitchen except for a bowl of wax fruit on the marble counter. Dodger sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. There was a painting there of the inside of a slaughterhouse. The workers were dressed in red-stained white overalls and looked absolutely ecstatic, surrounded by ripped-open pigs on hooks. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Josh's last words. "I don't want to die here." It felt so unfair for Holly, Dodger, Doc, and me to be sitting in the perfect, empty little kitchen with Josh dead on the other side of the door. After Doc woke up from his morphine nap, we all gathered around the table. It was silent for a long time. "Did he have a family?" Dodger asked. We all looked to Doc, since he'd made us submit bios before we started.
"Nobody he mentioned,"
Doc sighed. The bright light spilling from the tiny, tasteful chandelier above us felt almost profane. Josh was left in the dark. He died slow and afraid. His body was still back in that hallway. "Someone should say a few words," I suggested. We waited awkwardly for anyone else to begin. "He was brave," Dodger said finally. "Josh held it together better than I would have." "I liked his blog," Holly added. "He was a creative guy." "He saved my life," I said. "When I was stuck, if Josh hadn't been there to push, to help me through, I would have... That was all I was able to get out. It was about all there was to say on the matter. We made ready to go through the next door. There was no food in the kitchen, but we weren't leaving empty-handed. A set of knives with walnut handles gleamed sharp and polished on the counter next to the refrigerator. The handles were magnetized, the blades arranged from largest to smallest and stuck to a board. At Holly's suggestion, we each took a knife with us. I cinched mine through the belt at my side. I felt like the world's saddest pirate. Most of us elected slim steak or paring knives, but Dodger grabbed the heavy cleaver. I wondered if he expected to encounter any logs that needed splitting on our journey. Dodger noticed me looking askance at his claymore of a knife. He grinned. "You never know." The door leading out of the kitchen was soft cherry wood, a light red-brown in color. Holly took her place at the front of the line. Doc joined her.
"I think it would be better to have you cover our backs," he told Holly. "I'll take point from here, then Aaron, then Dodger. This is usually about as far as I get into the house before things go truly bizarre. Not that there's anything usual about this trip."
Holly hesitated, but shrugged and moved to the back of the line we were forming. Dodger was giving Doc a peculiar look, as if something was clicking into place and Dodger wasn't sure what to make of it.
"Ready?"
Doc asked, opening the door. Before any of us could reply, he slammed the door shut. "What?" Holly asked. Doc turned to us.
"Yellow fucking wallpaper."
"Shit," I said. That's bad, right?" Dodger asked. "I was sort of tuned out earlier when you were going over the rules." We were all looking at him. "My bad," he added.
"There's nowhere else for us to go,"
Doc said, tugging at the sleeve of his flannel.
Just nowhere else. So we have to go through. Everybody stay sharp, keep close, stay calm."
Doc opened the door, and we all went through. We found ourselves in a den. It reminded me of my grandfather's TV room, where he used to retreat to watch football and drink warm Budweiser. There was brown shag carpet that cushioned every footfall. The room was empty except for a large leather recliner in the center of the room, and an old-fashioned television, the kind with rabbit ears antenna. Peeling yellow wallpaper stretched from corner to corner. The space was small, and the next door was on the opposite wall from where we came in. "Well?" Dodger asked. Doc began padding across the carpet.
"Slow and steady, and..."
The television came to life with the distinct pop of vacuum tubes. The grainy picture and small screen made it difficult to see the program, so we all inched closer. "Oh fuck, it's us," Dodger whispered. "It's this room, isn't it?" It was. Even though the picture was sprinkled with static, the four figures on the television were clearly Doc, Dodger, Holly, and me. The TV showed the room we were in, the den with the shag carpet. However, there was one difference between the room we were standing in and the one reflected in the television. The TV showed something sitting in the empty leather chair. There was a shadow the size and shape of a child, distorted like a mirage hovering over summer pavement. As we watched the screen, the hazy shadow slid from the chair to face us.
"Nope," I said. "Absolutely not." I guess everyone agreed with my assessment, because the four of us were across the carpet and through the door in the space of one hanging moment. The next room, a bedroom, was uneventful. So was the room after, and the one after that, and the one after that. Guest rooms, living rooms, home offices all went winding by. However, the little details kept getting stranger and stranger. We passed through a bathroom that had a sick, small Joshua tree growing in the shower. Later, our group passed through an overgrown greenhouse. Decaying furniture sat in the middle of the room, wrapped with vines and kudzu. The walls were glass and looked out into the star-choked sky over an endless field. We debated breaking the glass to see if we could slip outside, but Doc was skeptical it would work. He guessed that even trying could cause the house to react. I remembered Josh gasping as the air was squeezed out of him in the hall. I wasn't overly eager to see what kind of reaction trying to break through a wall would provoke from the house. But looking back now, I wish we'd at least tried. Rooms kept getting less and less recognizable. There was a room where the floor was covered by several inches of hot red sand, and another with a shallow pond spreading out from a corner. Then, we came to the garage. A large, flat-screen TV hung on the wall in front of a chase lounge. Each corner of the room had its own entertainment. A punching bag in one corner, a retro arcade machine in another, a pool table, a computer with a desk. Off to the side, a bright neon Miller Lite sign glowed from a place of honor on the wall. Dodger looked sick. "What's wrong?" Holly asked. We'd piled into the room and formed a loose half-circle with the chase in the middle. Dodger's mouth worked up and down for a moment before he could speak. This is my garage," Dodger said. "We shouldn't be here. This room shouldn't be here." "We've been here long enough that the house is starting to know us," Doc said. "That happens, sometimes." "The house can read our minds?" I asked. "Kinda, sorta," Doc replied. I looked around uneasily, wondering what the house might cherry-pick out of my mind. "Of course it can," Dodger muttered. "I'm starting to think this whole thing is some bad acid trip I'm having. I'm probably passed out in my hot tub imagining you all." Doc made his way to the door. "Let's keep moving." "Wait," Dodger instructed, rifling through the cabinet under the television. He emerged with a bottle of vodka. I could have hugged him. "I guess the house is thorough when it goes skittering through our heads, eh?" he said. "I always keep a bottle here." "If the house made that, I'm not sure I would drink it," Holly warned. We all looked at Doc. He shrugged. "I've had food here before and nothing happened," Doc said. "It's fine, probably. I'm 75% sure." Dodger stuck his tongue out at Holly and took a swig. We all waited to see if he was going to start choking or vomit or catch on fire or any other insanity the house might have stuffed into the bottle. Instead, he shrugged and swished another mouthful of vodka around. "Tastes like classic Polish potato water to me," Dodger said, handing me the bottle. I was probably a little too quick to follow his lead, but I didn't care. The flavorless bite of the vodka gentled my nerves and flushed my cheeks. I looked up after taking a deep, deep pull on the bottle to find everyone watching me, eyebrows raised. "Seems fine to me as well," I said, passing the bottle to Holly. She was more reluctant, but eventually took a drink, as did Doc. Dodger pulled an empty black plastic bag from the small metal trash can by the desk. "I'm bringing the alcohol," he declared, plopping it into the bag. We left the room with a lighter step than when we had entered. It was manufactured chemical relief, though, not a genuine ease. The house was in my head, in all of our heads. What was it going to find? What was it going to pull out?
After the garage, the next room sent a shiver dancing down my spine. "This one's mine," I whispered. We were in my home office. I recognized the brown faux wood desk I'd ordered off Amazon, the off-balance chair with a coaster under one leg, even the coffee-stained stack of papers. What I didn't recognize was the picture on the desk. It was a photo of me as a child on the ground under a tree. I had a look of absolute agony written all over my face, and I was cradling my arm. It was bent at an unnatural angle. A subtle white burr of broken bone jutted out from the skin just under my elbow. I still remember that fall. Feeling my arm bend until it snapped was the most pain I've ever felt. I needed 3 surgeries to fix that break. That day was one of the most miserable of my childhood, and to the best of my knowledge, no picture was ever taken of me under the tree with my twisted arm. Even if one did exist, there's no way I'd frame it and keep it on my desk. "Something's wrong here," I said. "This is my office, but it's just wrong." We went through quickly. The next room belonged to Doc. Did we get out?" Dodger asked. The 4 of us were back in Doc's parlor. That was the place where all of this really started, the room where he told us the rules. When Josh was still alive.
"I don't think we're out," Doc said. "I think the house is just, I'm not sure. Messing with us isn't the right way to put it."
Holly began exploring the bookshelves. "It's looking for a reaction, isn't it?" She turned back to us. "The house is poking us to see what happens." "If this is poking, I don't want to see what happens when it starts prodding," I said.
"Oh, Christ,"
Doc whispered. I turned to follow his eyes and saw a portrait hanging on the wall. It was beautifully painted in muted blues and grays and whites. The picture was young Doc, sitting alone in a row of chairs. It looked like some kind of waiting room. His face was hidden in his hands, but it was easy to read his body language, the slump of his shoulders. I could almost feel the waves of grief rolling off of him.
"The hospital," Doc said. "After Rebecca's miscarriage. She was 3 weeks from her due date. We'd been decorating the nursery all day."
"I'm so sorry," Holly said, coming to stand next to Doc. "That painting 100% was not there before," I heard Dodger remark from somewhere behind me. "Not back in the, real world, I guess you'd call it."
"Poking and prodding," Doc muttered.
He stood staring at the painting for a long time. The rest of us milled around.
"Okay," Doc said after a few minutes. "We should keep going."
I expected a room for Holly next. I bet we all did. And I was right. But I didn't expect it to be occupied. We emerged from Doc's parlor into a smaller space, a bedroom. The lighting was dim. A single, bright nightlight in the corner provided all of the illumination we had. It cast shadows off of the chairs, the small bed, the wind chimes. They were everywhere, the chimes, hanging from the ceiling and from shelves. There was no breeze, but they rang softly as we came through the door. In addition to the wind chimes, the room was decorated with dozens of pictures on the walls. It was hard to make out details in the dim room, but I could tell the pictures closest to me were drawn in crayon and almost entirely done in black and red. More concerning than the low light, the chimes, or the pictures, was the lump under the covers on the bed. "This is my old room when I was a kid," Holly whispered. Her voice was usually so steady, so efficient, but it was wavering now. It's not right. This isn't how it was. We should..." "Hi, Holly." The voice came from the small bump on the bed. Holly began to shake. "Holly," the voice said again, terser this time. There was an odd sing-song quality to the voice, a sweetness that bordered on saccharine and made the hairs stand up on my neck. "Hi, Ava," Holly replied. The lump on the bed began to squirm.
"Holly,"
Doc muttered, a note of warning.
"Careful. Whoever it is, whatever it is, remember, do not lie.
Holly nodded. "Where did you go?" Ava asked. Holly swallowed. "I grew up." "You left me. I looked for you," Ava said. "I never stopped looking for you. At first I was afraid for you, and then I missed you. I don't miss you so much anymore. Why did you leave?" I grew up," Holly repeated. "You abandoned me," Ava said, voice a cracking whip of accusation. "You left me alone in the dark. You were the only one I had to talk to. Why would you do that? How could you do that?" "Because you're not real," Holly whispered. "None of this is real." The lump on the bed grew taller as Ava stood. She writhed, and the blankets slipped away. Ava looked like a young girl wearing a pale blue summer dress. It was hard to guess her exact age because her face was deformed, features smeared and stretched until they ran together. "What the fuck?" Dodger said. She is... Holly swallowed hard again. "That's the way I used to draw her. I was young. I could never get the details right. I always had to erase and erase until there was just a smudge." Holly shook her head and took a hesitant step towards Ava. "You're not real." "Everything's real here," Ava said, sliding off of the bed. The chimes began to clink and rustle. "Go," Doc said, and we did. Holly stood frozen for a moment, but Dodger grabbed her, half carried and half hustled her to the door. I was the last one out and glanced over my shoulder to see Ava standing next to the bed, an even blur of eyes watching us. I think she was smiling. I stumbled through the door, and Doc kicked it shut. We all looked shaken, but Holly looked rattled. She'd been the first to act when Doc was hurt. She'd tried to climb back into the tunnel to save Josh. To see her pale and trembling, it made me start to feel a little rattled myself. "We need to calm down," Doc advised, working to control his breathing. "You ever notice how telling someone to calm down usually has the exact goddamn opposite effect?" Dodger asked. I looked around this new room and let out an involuntary gasp. It was the largest space we'd entered yet. High vaulted ceilings were held by soaring marble pillars. The floor was marble as well, white and glossy as wet bone. But the most striking features of the room were the walls. Every inch of them, from floor to ceiling, was covered in a gigantic mural. I say mural, but it would be more accurate to say murals, each flowing seamlessly into the next, each more disturbing than the last. The murals showed beautifully illustrated snapshots of the worst moments in my life. I recognized myself as a teen burying my childhood dog under the same oak tree I'd fallen from when I broke my arm. Past the column on my left, I saw a picture of my old apartment. The door was open to the dirty street, framing Tom's back as he walked out, forever. The doctor's office after he came back with the results of Mom's biopsy. I found myself drifting around the room, unable to look away from the trauma painted on every wall. The mural contained more than just my worst days. I saw a picture of Doc holding the hand of a bleeding woman, both of them lying in the sand next to the ocean. There was Dodger on a long winter road being pulled out of the mangled ruins of his car, his face lit with raw agony. Over in the corner, I saw Holly in camo and combat gear, desperately trying to put the shiny red insides of a fellow soldier torn open on a desert road. There was more, dozens of tragedies, large and small, etched artfully all around us. I heard Holly suppress a sob behind me. "Poking and prodding," Doc said again. "Jesus wept. Try not to look." Easier said than done. We'd drawn together towards the center of the room. "We should," I began, mouth snapping shut on my tongue when I heard the sound of wind chimes. The ceiling light closest to the door we'd come through died, darkness falling like a slamming gate. "Move!" Dodger shouted. We crossed the room quickly, illustrated walls crawling by in a taunting blur. Another light flickered and died behind us, and the sound of chimes rang louder. I thought I could detect faint laughter under the noise. The next door rose tall and wide in front of us. It was strangely textured. It took me a moment to realize the entire opening was covered with a heavy, blank canvas. A bronze doorknob stood out against the white. Doc reached for it and cursed.
"It's locked,"
he said. Lights kept popping and dying, a rolling wave of pitch black crashing towards us. The wind chimes were a cacophony of teeth-grinding ringing. "There's a task, right?" I asked Doc. "That's what you said before, that some rooms require something before you can leave?"
"What do you do with a blank canvas?"
Doc said to himself. Suddenly, he pulled out the kitchen knife he had tucked in his belt. With one tight motion, Doc tugged down on the blade and opened a razor-red slit in his palm. He pressed his open hand to the canvas and traced a slick arc across the door. "Are you nuts?" Dodger asked. Doc let his bleeding hand drop to his side.
"Do you have a better idea?"
Dodger hesitated, but only for a second. Another light went out, and the room suddenly felt small and claustrophobic.
"Fuck,"
Dodger said through gritted teeth, dragging the edge of his cleaver across his palm and then smearing a streak of red against the canvas.
"Aaron,"
Doc said. I fumbled at the knife in my belt. The wind chimes were so loud, like church bells in a hailstorm. Doc got tired of waiting, grabbed my arm, and sliced my palm with his knife. I bit back a yelp, then added my blood to the door.
"Holly,"
Doc said.
"Holly?"
She was turned away from us, staring back into the dark gallery. Dodger pulled her towards the door. "Come on," he said, gently but loudly enough to be heard over the mad bang of the chimes. Dodger cut her palm. Holly winced and seemed to snap back to the moment. With one last glance back, she pressed her hand onto the canvas. Before she could pull back, two small hands pushed through from the other side of the door, wrapping around Holly's fingers.
"Oh God, let go! Let go! Let go! Let go!"
"Sure thing," a voice said from everywhere around us. Ava's fingers sunk into Holly's hand and then ripped back, degloving all of the skin from Holly's wrist to her fingertips and pulling out the nails. Holly stumbled back, shrieking. Her blood splashed in a red ribbon against the canvas. The door clicked open. The last light was dying above us. Dodger caught Holly as she tripped and pulled her through the door. Doc and I followed on his heels, shutting the door behind us. We all collided, falling into a pile and onto cold dirt and fresh pine needles. Somehow, we'd stumbled into a wide open forest within the house. Evergreens towered above us, the tree line broken by puddles of dark sky tattooed by unfamiliar constellations. Holly got some sleep. We gave her what little morphine she had in her pocket. There were no bandages left, so we could only clean her shredded hand with Dodger's vodka and wrap it in a torn sleeve from Doc's flannel. It was getting colder, the wind picking up. Doc watched over Holly. Dodger and I shared what was left of the alcohol. No one talked. I got a peek in Dodger's bag when he brought out the bottle. There was a huge book in there, black with silver lettering on the spine. "When he falls asleep," Dodger whispered, nodding towards Doc. "Well?" I asked, trying to lean over Dodger's shoulder to read from the page he had open. We were perched on a simple dirt trail at the top of an embankment. "I'll give you the spark notes in a second," he said, glancing up. "Just keep your eyes on our friend." I turned to look for Doc. He was sleeping, back against a tree near the edge of the path we were on. Holly was sleeping as well, curled up in the grass not far from Dodger and me. I didn't know how either of them could sleep in the cold. The thin shirt I was wearing provided no protection against the chill. There was a bite in the wind that rustled the trees around us. The night air was crisp and smelled like pine, and the stars above us provided an unnatural amount of light. I noticed webs in the forest, billowing silk that fell across the trees like tinsel. The wind stirred the branches, and I shivered, wrapping my arms around my chest, trying to keep my body heat from fleeing the sinking ship that was my sorry ass. I couldn't resist looking back towards Dodger. He had the strangest expression on his face, Confusion and worry displayed in equal measure. "What does it say?" I whispered. Dodger shook his head. It's rambling. Part journal, part I don't even fucking know. He dies and the world dies with him. The body fails, the mind begins to reach. There's just so much weirdness here. Little slices of crazy scrawled across the pages along with a daily journal. "What's the journal about?" I asked, leaning closer. "Doc, about one of his trips here. If this is right," Dodger flipped between pages, "then Doc and his group were here for maybe months, years? It doesn't make sense, but it does seem to be from Doc's point of view. Jesus, listen to this. He waits on the cliff, attended by the taken. We all hold our borrowed breath from dying dreams he awakens." Kind of fucking odd, don't you think? "Everything here's odd," I mumbled. "Everything's wrong." Doc and Holly were both maimed by the trip. Josh... I couldn't stop thinking about Josh's final words. "I don't want to die here." The house trapped him, pressed the air from his lungs and the life from his body. Slowly. Horribly. "Christ," Dodger whispered, flipping towards the end of the book. He looked up at me, his sharp blue eyes catching me. "Doc's wife, his friends. So many people died here." I moved so I could see the book. Dodger didn't protest. The handwriting was a mad scramble. Black ink staggered dancing across the page. What I saw was part journal, part poem, or maybe a fever dream. "The blind seer has shown me. He is fragile. He holds us on shattered shoulders. We walk through him. We must tread gently. Should he stir, history remembers and recoils. His name is the whip of the ages." I read to myself. The rambling verses rushed together into more conventional prose. Day 88. Jonathan fell down this morning and could not get up. The blood loss was too much for him. We took turns dragging him. None of us had the strength to carry him, not while he struggled weakly like a gutted fish. Annie wanted to bury him, but this isn't a place to waste anything. Who knows what the doors ahead might... "Where did you find that?" Doc asked from behind us. I'd let myself get distracted. I wasn't watching him, hadn't seen him approach. His footfalls were muffled by the fallen pine needles covering the ground. Doc stood on the path, looking ragged in his torn flannel, gray hair tousled and stuck with leaves from where he'd slept against a tree. He didn't look angry or concerned. His well-wrinkled eyes just looked tired. Dodger closed the book and leveled it like a dueling pistol at Doc. "Be honest with me. Are you completely fucking crazy?" "Calm down," Doc said. Dodger stood up. I sheepishly followed. It felt like we'd been caught snooping through Doc's privacy. Then I thought of the unsettling scribbling in the book, and I felt considerably less guilty. "Don't tell me to calm down," Dodger said, taking a step towards Doc. Doc stood his ground, but raised his mangled hands. "Easy. I'll answer whatever questions you have. Just take it easy." "I'm as easy as a goddamn Sunday morning," Dodger snapped. Doc made a soothing motion with his hands. "Don't raise your voice." "I'm not," Dodger said, raising his voice. I glanced around, trying to peer through the shadows between the trees. Did I hear the faint ripple of chimes, or was it just my imagination? Either way, a slow, animal dread climbed my spine like a ladder. "Dodger," I whispered in warning. "What's going on?" The raised voices must have woken Holly. She stood just off the path, her skinned hand wrapped in Doc's flannel. Even in the low light, I could see the bundle was soaked dark red. Holly took a step towards the rest of us, stumbled, caught herself. Her injury was clearly taking its toll, but she seemed the most composed out of the four of us. "Don't yell," Holly said. "Sorry," Dodger said, sounding frustrated but cowed. "But something isn't right here." He tapped the book. "It's like an immune system," Holly continued, ignoring Dodger. "This house, it's responding to us like we're pathogens." She looked at the bloody flannel covering her hand.
When we get afraid, upset, that's how it detects us, I think. Germs it wants to squash, Doc muttered.
Okay, Dodger said, pacing on the path, glaring at Doc. Fine, we'll be calm, but I want to know about the book. I want to know how many people died before you brought us here.
Where did you get the book? Doc asked. Did you bring it from my study, or did you find it here in the house?
What does it matter? Dodger responded. I remembered the second false study we'd passed through, the recreation.
If you got it here, you can't trust it, Doc said. The house is only trying to get to you, to piss you off.
The wind cut again across the path, and I shivered. The trees, with their tatters of web and leaves, seemed to bob up and down eagerly, as if they were listening. It dawned on me then how much I hated the house, as if it were a living thing. Perhaps it was. And like all too many living things, the house appeared so needlessly cruel. If Holly was right and we were triggering some sort of immune response, why did it have to hurt us so much? Dodger shook his head. Maybe, I don't know. What I do know is I don't trust you, Doc. We need to stick together, I chimed in, feeling like a child trying to pipe up at the adult table. Why did you line us up with Josh in the back when we first started? Dodger asked, ignoring me.
I don't understand what you mean,
Doc replied. You put us in a very particular order. Dodger ticked off a count with his thin fingers, drumming them against the back cover of the black book. Holly, you, me, Aaron, Josh. You put us in that exact order. Why?
No reason, just so we could move single file.
Bullshit! Dodger spat. You put Josh in the back because he was the biggest. He was the most likely to get stuck in that fucking hallway, and if he'd been in front, we all would have been stuck.
Listen to yourself, Dodger, Doc countered. You're paranoid, seeing patterns and randomness. The rooms here, you've seen it, they don't make sense. They're unpredictable. How could I have known we'd even pass through that hall?
Doc held up his maimed hands. The bandages around what was left of his fingers were stained brown and shredded to rags.
Does it look like I know what this crazy house is doing? Someone has riled it up, much worse than I've ever seen it, and you're not helping. That book is just... It's like a nest of wasps you're carrying. It's affecting your judgment.
Doc reached out, and Dodger pulled back. No, I haven't sorted it all out yet, but this is screwy, Dodger said. He pointed to Doc with the book. You stay here. We'll go on and look for the next door. Once we're out of here, we'll, send help. That's not going to work, Dodger, Holly said gently. We can't leave anyone. Doc glanced at me.
I'll need your help. Just hold him for a sec. I think the book is fucking with him. We need to separate them.
I opened my mouth, not sure how to respond, but Dodger was already pulling up defensively. Don't try it, he warned me. I wasn't really planning to, I thought. Doc took a step towards Dodger.
Hey, just calm.
Dodger shoved Doc backward. Doc stumbled, eyes wide, then pushed back. In the blink of an eye, they were on each other. I heard chimes ripple somewhere in the deep woods. Hey! Holly yelled, trying to pull them apart. Stop! I did my best to wrap my arms around Dodger and separate him from Doc, but he was strong for someone so wiry. While I was pulling from behind, Doc suddenly lunged forward past Holly, and he and Dodger collided. The two of them went off the path, rolling down the embankment at our side. Holly and I could only watch as they slipped out of sight into the tree line. Idiots, Holly whispered. Then she was moving, sliding down after the pair. I did my best to ignore the quiet chiming all around us as I followed. We found Doc at the edge of the tree line, scraped but unhurt. Dodger was deeper in the woods. As I came down the slope, I saw Doc scramble towards Dodger, grab his arm as best he could, and try to drag him back to us. Help! Doc shouted, turning towards Holly and me. Quick! The starlight was weak here in the shadows of the tall trees, but even in the low light, I could see the panic animating Dodger's face. That's when I noticed the webs, what seemed like acres of them, covering the forest floor like dust in an abandoned house. They started near the tree line, and Dodger had landed at the edge of them, half stuck. He was thrashing.
"Please!" he called out. "Oh God, please pull me out!"
I heard hissing from farther back in the trees. A shadow the size of a large house cat dropped from nearby branches. It was a spider, dark brown and bloated. The thing was hissing as it cautiously approached Dodger. His panic intensified. Dodger was hyperventilating, and I saw him tear small patches of clothing and skin as he struggled to pull himself free. The spider suddenly skittered forward, fast as a whip crack. But Holly was ready, the toe of her boot catching the thing under its left leg as it came close to Dodger. It flew back, making a sound uncomfortably close to a shriek. The spider rolled as it fell, then reared up on its back legs, exposing its underside. Its belly split vertically, and I saw a set of perfect, flat teeth. A human mouth nearly the length of the spider's torso opened. The shriek came again from the thing, then a gurgling sound like it was choking. Or maybe it was laughing at us. It made one half lunge forward, then pulled back, skittering off back up the tree it fell from.
"Help me!"
Doc yelled. I tore my gaze away from the high branches where the shadow of the spider had disappeared, to find Doc still pulling at Dodger. Holly had situated herself behind Dodger, stepping carefully to avoid as much webbing as possible. She was leaning into Dodger, pushing. I joined Doc and pulled from the other side, struggling to ignore the terrible certainty I had that the laughing spider would fall from the branches above onto my back at any moment. Dodger was more hindrance than help, still thrashing against the webbing and us. Hysteria had a firm grasp on Dodger's mind for the moment. It felt like hours, though it must have been only moments, when Dodger finally ripped free with a sound like bedsheets tearing. All four of us stumbled back. I saw more movement on the forest floor. Spiders, some as large as a hand and many others nearly as big, rolled towards us like a living carpet. We scrambled, running and tripping back up the embankment.
"Shit!"
Holly screamed. She'd been the farthest back, and I saw her kicking out desperately, trying to shake loose a few palm-sized spiders that had latched onto her legs. I turned to help pull her up the rest of the slope. Doc reached out as well, and even Dodger had recovered enough composure to grab Holly's arm and pull. The four of us landed back on the dirt trail. Dodger tore off his shirt and began whipping it down at Holly's legs, attempting to knock the creatures away. One of the spiders was torn away, and Holly shrieked. The thing had been holding on with the human teeth on its belly and ripped a long piece of denim and flesh away from her calf. The spider landed near me, rearing up in mimicry of its larger relative, hissing. I was very glad I'd worn heavy hiking boots on this trip. My heel came down on the creature like a gavel, and there was a madly satisfying crunch. The other spider was on Holly's ankle, stubbornly holding on. Dodger couldn't seem to knock it loose. Quick as a gunslinger, Doc shot a hand out and grabbed the creature between his thumb and what remained of his fingers. With an efficient jerk, Doc popped the thing from Holly's leg, taking denim and skin with it. Holly rolled away, letting out a weak spurt of vomit, whether from the pain or venom I didn't know. Doc tried to fling the spider away, but it had wrapped legs like knitting needles around his fingers. He stared down at it in disgust. Instead of biting, the palm-sized horror pulled back and spit a thin stream of murky liquid directly into Doc's face. He screamed, ugly and raw, and fell to the ground. The impact knocked the spider free. This time it was Dodger's boot that came down, heavy and final. Doc was writhing on the ground, hands over his face, moaning. Holly was curled in the fetal position, a small puddle of sick next to her, and she was silent. Dodger and I stood frozen. Then, like a dead clock jarred back into operation, we both moved at the same instant. I scanned the trail frantically for any signs of spiders. It seemed none of them had followed us up the embankment except for the two attached to Holly. Dodger dropped down next to her, cradling her neck and tearing his shirt into a tourniquet, wrapping it around the leg both creatures had bitten. "For the venom," he said when he noticed me looking over. We waited there for 10 or 15 minutes before Doc and Holly could move. Holly's pulse was rapid, her pupils dilated and skin clammy, but she was able to move without assistance. I prayed whatever venom was in her wasn't lethal. In the real world, I knew most spider bites weren't deadly, but the wildlife in this house made the worst parts of Australia look like a petting zoo. Doc, despite not being bit, was doing much worse. His face was a pulpy mess, red and swollen and wet. Worst of all were his eyes, clouded with a milky gray film.
"It's really dark,"
Doc said after sitting in silence for a long time.
I can't.
"We'll fix it," Dodger promised, still next to Holly. "It's just temporary." He sat shivering, holding Holly close. I could tell Dodger blamed himself for her injury, probably for Doc's as well. Personally, I saw it all as a big clusterfuck, just like the entire trip through the house, an ongoing accident unfolding over the course of hours, days. I struggled to track exactly how long it had been since we went through the blue door. I was hungry, and I was cold, and I needed a drink like a god needed worship. But all I could do was dab uselessly at Doc's eyes with my sleeve and squeeze his shoulder. He looked small, frail, sitting with his face down and arms wrapped around his knees, more like a kid than a man at the tail end of middle age. Dodger looked drawn out as well, thin and pale. I doubt I looked much better. Holly, she'd been through the ringer. Even though she was the smallest of all of us, the most hurt, I guess Doc could argue that point. Even with all that, she was the one to keep us moving. "We have to go," she said, bracing against Dodger to pull herself up. The action seemed to cause a wave of nausea to hit her, but she swallowed it down. "Staying here just means dying slow." "Might be better than dying fast," Dodger muttered, but he was standing as well, propping an arm around Holly, which got him a nod of thanks. She removed her tourniquet. "It's not going to make much difference now, and we have a lot of walking to do," Holly told Dodger, handing him back the torn remains of his shirt. "But thank you." I helped Doc to his feet and played the dual roles of crutch and seeing eye dog. We were a sad little parade walking together on the trail. But we were still moving. There was perpetual night in the forest. I'm not sure how many hours we followed the path, but the sun should have gone up, if there was a sun to rise. Strange voices called out to us from the dark of the woods. They whispered and threatened in half-formed words or garbled languages. I remembered the spiders with the human mouths on their bellies, and I sent a prayer to anything listening that whatever was in the trees would stay there. The trail terminated in an open clearing. White wicker furniture dominated the space. Chairs and lounges and tables lay scattered on the manicured grass. There was more light in the clearing, and the moon shone blue-white and low to the ground. At one edge of the glade was a massive movie screen. It looked so surreal, standing on its own with no walls for support. "We should move on," I suggested. "Quickly." The words had hardly left my mouth before I heard chimes from the woods around us. "Shit," whispered Dodger. The clearing was surrounded by faceless children. Even though her features were only a blur, I recognized Holly's abandoned imaginary friend standing at the edge of the forest. Dozens of other blank forms encircled us. In the trees above them, dark shadows moved and made gibbering noises, skittering from branch to branch.
"What is it?"
Doc asked. "You genuinely don't want to know," Dodger said. "We're surrounded." "Why aren't they moving?" Holly asked, leaning against Dodger for support. There was a dull silver gleam on the massive screen. I couldn't see a projector, but detected the faint pop and whirl of celluloid film. I sank into the nearest wicker chair. Maybe we're supposed to watch a movie. After a few moments of hesitation, everyone else found a seat. Dodger and Holly kept scanning the tree line. "I have a strong feeling we're not going to like whatever we see," Dodger muttered. Doc chuckled, a sound that rolled into an exhausted laugh. I think he could sense us staring at him. Doc winked one cloudy, blind eye.
"Of all the shit the house could throw at me, watching a film is the one I'm least afraid of."
The insanity of the trip, of finding our group stuck in a clearing, surrounded by monsters, forced to watch a fucking movie. It broke something in me. I laughed. After a moment, Dodger and Holly joined in, the laughter of the tired and lost. It went on for a long time. Holly wasn't doing well. After the laughter, she kept throwing up and shivering. Doc somehow fell asleep. "Do you still have the book?" I mouthed to Dodger as we waited. He only shook his head, then looked back to Holly as she shuddered next to him. I could feel Dodger's guilt and his fear, but I was having trouble feeling anything at all. Only tired. Dodger, Doc, Holly, and I watched the blank movie screen while the things in the forest watched us. Doc kept nodding off next to me, and Holly was paler by the minute. It's an awful thing watching people die slow with no way to help, no one to call. Dodger was restless, eyeing the shadows at the tree line like he wanted to pick a fight. I didn't think that would be any use. Instead, I stared up at the stale night sky, praying for any sign of life, the flare of a satellite or white scar of a red-eye flight. We were awash in isolation. Images began to flicker across the theater screen. There was no sound. A woman and a boy, dark-haired with light complexions, walking together in a maze of lights. There were evergreens and neon reindeer, hanging light bulbs, stands selling hot chocolate. An ice rink was visible through the maze. Families and lovers glided across the ice in singles and pairs. Snow began to fall. The camera, home movie quality at best, pulled in on the boy, who looked vaguely familiar.
"Oh,"
Dodger said. Don't do this." The woman and the boy walked on, sipping hot chocolate and watching the snow fall. Then a man joined them, carrying a basket of funnel cake. Smiling, the woman took a bite, then kissed him, leaving the impression of powdered sugar on his cheek. The boy reached up, asking to be carried. Handing the food to the woman, the man swept the boy up in his arms, and the trio moved further into the maze. They looked like a family, happy and in love, celebrating somewhere in the shadow of Christmas. Dodger was shaking in his chair.
"What's wrong?"
Holly asked, sitting up next to him. Dodger stared at the screen.
"That's my son and my wife, ex-wife, and her new husband."
The boy was light in the man's arms, held gentle and near the way a father would carry his whole world. "I'm sorry," I told Dodger.
"Not nearly as much as I am,"
he replied. The screen clipped and a new video began to play. Tall and blonde with a soldier's haircut and a game show smile, Tom beamed down at us, standing on a stage. "Your ex?" Dodger asked Holly.
"Mine,"
I whispered. Every fiber a showman, Tom bowed to the crowd, sweeping off his cap. There was still no sound, but I remembered the applause he got, how the whole house stood and cheered. Everyone but me in the back corner, already drunk and angry about something I couldn't even remember now. The movie jumped, and now it was my apartment. Tom and I in the middle of another argument. I was yelling, pointing at the door. Tom only looked tired. There was no trace of that smile of his that could shine out even under a spotlight. He turned and walked away. One more scene skip. Tom, alone in his car, wearing the same clothes. This must have been just after the argument, a perspective I'd never seen. He was staring at the door to my building, crying silently, hands tight on the wheel. Maybe Tom was trying to decide if it was worth it to walk back again one more time. Or, more likely, he was hoping I'd be the one to finally open that door, to apologize, to do better. I never realized how long he waited watching the door before he drove away. "What happened?" Dodger asked as the screen followed the red lines of Tom's brake lights. I ran my fingers through my hair. The same thing that always happened. I drank too much and said sorry too little. We were both involved in the local theater scene, me as a writer, Tom as an actor. But only one of us was doing well. It wasn't me. Maybe I took that out on him. Maybe we were just drifting through the natural shift apart that threatens all couples and continents. Whatever it was, it made us argue, and I couldn't help but see every argument as a competition to win instead of a chance to do better. I loved feeling like I won. My writing might be mediocre, but I've always had an exceptional talent for getting under people's skin. There was just... I stopped speaking as the screen changed again. It was so strange watching a movie without sound. All I could hear was the wind brushing the trees. No other insects or forest sounds at all. Everything happening on the screen looked loud. There was sand, high dunes, dust kicked into the air. We were watching a desert in the middle of a war zone. A trail of bullets skipped by like rocks across a pond. It was a pitched fight. A half-ring of tan Humvees circled like wagons, providing cover for about a dozen soldiers. The camera zoomed in on two of the figures sheltering behind the vehicles, one writhing on the ground, the other crouched above. The latter was clearly Holly, looking a few years younger, in her army kit with a red medic patch on her arm. She was wide-eyed, arms stained red. The man on the ground was porcelain pale, staring up in shock. His stomach was an open cavity of scarlet and purple, guts spilling out in wet ropes. Young Holly was desperately trying to keep the man's insides in, scooping and pushing and holding and crying. The dying soldier kept trying to speak, but it seemed like he was choking. Blood ran down his chin, outlining his lips. "Jesus," Dodger whispered. "Shrapnel," Holly said, no emotion in her voice, but her small hands were fists, and they trembled. I exhaled hard. "A friend?" "More," Holly replied. "More. One of the reasons they discourage relationships. It's hard watching friends die. Much worse watching someone you love bleed out on the sand because you can't put them back together." Holly stopped, choking down the memory. The screen flickered and went black for a few moments, and when it came back, the scene was of a beach covered in snow. Chunks of ice rolled in with the tide. Snow fell in wind-snapped sheets, and fog lay over the water. Most of the beach and ocean were obscured, but two figures stood out clear near the shoreline. The first was unmistakably Doc, but some younger version. He was a little less gaunt, fewer cracks around his eyes, and there was still dirty blonde mixed in with his graying hair. The woman standing next to him had coffee-colored skin and was built like a dancer. I recognized her as Doc's wife from the picture we'd seen in the house's version of Doc's study. Both of them stood together, hand in hand, looking out over the ocean into the fog and snow. Massive shadows moved on the horizon, hidden shapes that towered over the ocean. I was glad for the curtain provided by the snow and clouds and mist. I had no desire to see what those things would look like, drifting figures the size of skyscrapers. "What is it?" Doc asked, his swollen face and glossy eyes staring towards the screen. "What do you see?" "It's you and your wife on a beach," I said. "It's snowing and—" "Oh," Doc cut me off. "That's enough. I know what it is." Dodger turned away from the screen. "Doc, what happened?" "I lost her. Obviously, I lost her. I don't need to elaborate." "Okay," Dodger said. "And I'm sorry, but—" The screen went black. At the same moment, the entire clearing flooded with noise. There was screaming in the woods, laughing, wailing, and begging. The thump of a heavy landing. Trees cracking. The volume swelled until I was on the ground next to my chair, palms pressed against my ears hard enough I was afraid I'd crack my skull. All of the noise stopped at the same instant. We were left in the clearing, ears still aching, in a hangover of silence. "They're gone," Dodger said. He and Holly were huddled together on the ground. "The creepy kids and those spider fucks that were watching us are gone." Doc was the only one of us still seated.
"We should go now, while we can."
We walked through the forest, always on the path. Dodger helped Holly walk while I guided Doc. The four of us stayed silent. I knew I was in my head about what we just watched, and I imagined the others were reflecting on their own movies as well. The night was getting colder and colder. I wasn't sure how many hours, or days, or weeks we'd been in the forest. It all ran together, and time didn't seem to work normally within the house. I was pretty confident there wasn't going to be a sunrise no matter how long we walked. The night grew darker and less hospitable as we went. Even the stars above us were changing, the constellations growing jagged and the starlight dim. There was a new star in the sky peeking over the tree line. A red star, one that caused nausea any time I glanced at it. Doc seemed to be adjusting well to his newer, blinder reality. I only had to guide him gently. He never wavered or tripped. Holly, however, was getting worse by the hour. The venom running through her veins appeared to be wearing her down. She did her best to keep up, but struggled to walk for more than a few minutes before Dodger had to carry her. They made frequent stops whenever Holly needed to get sick by the side of the road. Dodger held her hair and did his best to comfort her while Doc and I sat on the trail. Clouds were running up from behind us, and not long after we left the theater and the clearing, the wind began to rise. A storm was biting at our heels. We tried to pick up the pace, but the forest seemed endless. The trail wound through strange places, stretches of woods where entire cities' worth of furniture stood abandoned under the trees. There were old beds and broken chairs, dressers and nightstands and televisions, all strewn among the roots and branches around us. It was like God had opened a dollhouse and shaken the contents out over the forest. The clouds were swift and devoured the stars above us. Hard wind ran through us like ice sharpened to a razor. At the first crack of thunder, I debated suggesting we take shelter under the trees, but I was afraid to leave the path. Even though they were silent, I knew the creatures and the children were still likely in the woods around us. It would be a risk to even approach the tree line. The decision was made for us when the first drops of rain fell fat and cold from the sky above. As the water hit my skin, I screamed. The rain burned. Each drop was like a wasp landing. We ran for the trees without saying a word, Dodger carrying Holly. I prayed the things watching us in the clearing hadn't followed this far.
"Why do you think the house showed us those home movies back there?"
Holly asked. The four of us sat together just inside the tree line. Thunder drummed around us, but the rain was slowing down. An occasional burning drip would fall down from the branches above and leave a little stinging kiss on exposed arms or necks. We were careful not to look up. "Because it likes fucking with us," Dodger answered. "This house has been jerking us around since we walked through the first door." Poking, I thought. Prodding. "But why?" Holly asked. She was shaking constantly now, her eyes unfocused.
"Maybe it doesn't need a reason,"
Doc said.
"Maybe it's just for fun. Or maybe it's a test, or all of that, none of that."
Doc let out a little laugh.
"Maybe it doesn't matter."
Dodger looked out across the path. Lightning threaded through the sky. "When we get out of here, I'm burning your house down, Doc," Dodger said. "Sorry." Doc laughed again.
If we get out of here, you have my blessing to try."
Once the rain was finished, we went back to the trail. The world around us was silent and dim. Most of the stars were still cloud-covered, but an ugly red tint lay over the forest. The glow came from behind the clouds from a single blurry point of scarlet. It was like the sky was bleeding into cotton bandages. I couldn't look at the red star, it had to be a star, for long without feeling nauseous and angry. We walked on, and the world became increasingly stranger. The forest grew close and tight to the path. Soon enough, the path became only the hint of a trail through the trees. Furniture was scattered everywhere. Objects and trees merged together. There was a steep hill along our way, and after we crossed it, we found ourselves looking down on the rest of the forest. Fog was rolling in like waves. "Jesus," Dodger whispered. In the distance, half hidden by the fog and red gloom, was the largest tree I'd ever seen. It dominated the skyline, a giant spike driven into the world. And it was moving, not just swaying in the breeze. The branches stretched and undulated with a mind of their own. I thought of a massive squid deep in the ocean, only with 100 arms, each floating away from the body. I glanced at one of the trees near us on the hill. The tree glanced back at me. A single human eye the size of a watermelon stared down from the trunk. It was bright blue. As I watched, it blinked slowly. "Fuck this place," I said. The rest of the group noticed the tree. The massive iris followed me as I walked closer. "Over here," Dodger called, looking up at another tree. His tree had an open mouth wide enough to crawl through, if you were so inclined. I wasn't. A fat pink tongue dangled out from the lipless maw. The mouth smiled, showing perfect teeth, and I felt my stomach flip. I tried to stay calm, but there was something deeply unsettling about the trees, beyond the obvious. They seemed aware of us, interested.
"Just keep moving," Doc said, cresting the hill.
I stared down at the path as I walked. Each time I glanced up at the trees closest to us, I felt worse. Some of the trunks had complete faces pressing out from under the bark. They wore a variety of expressions, none of them pleasant. Off in the distance, the giant tree still moved slowly. There were shining lights visible towards the end of each swaying branch. I couldn't see anything clearly through the fog, but the lights were strangely attractive, like beacons. Or lures. Once we were over the hill, I saw that the drop to the forest below was even steeper than I'd thought. We were on the cusp of a valley that stretched for maybe 100 yards. On the other side, the forest rose up again. There was a fallen tree between the two hill peaks. At the opposite side of the makeshift bridge, I saw the next door, circular and white. "Finally," Dodger said. "Oh, thank God." Holly leaned against a nearby tree, hopefully after checking to make sure it didn't have eyes or teeth. "Don't thank anybody yet. We still have to either cross that tree or go through the valley. I vote valley."
"The tree's fine,"
Doc said, brushing past me. He stepped 1 foot on the trunk. The tree was wide at the base, maybe 25 feet around, and stripped bare of branches or leaves, but it seemed to get narrower as it went. "No offense, Doc," I said, "but how can you know if the tree's fine? Can you even see it?" He turned back to me and grinned. His eyes were milky white.
"I can sense the tree's reliability. Have some faith."
Doc began to walk across. We all shared a look, but we followed. I tried my best not to look down. Every now and then, I couldn't resist, though. The fog was thick and rolling under us. Large silhouettes undulated below. One emerged from the mist slowly, like a breaching whale. It was one of the branches from the giant tree. I could see the light on the end clearly now, blue and diluted. The glow was shaped like a woman, beautiful from the waist up. Her torso ended in a slick, oily thread that tied to the tip of the branch. She smiled at me, and I felt myself wanting to take a step towards her. Dodger grabbed my arm. "Don't look," he said. "Eyes down, we're almost there." Halfway across the gorge, the trunk became too narrow to walk on. We were forced to crawl one by one. I've never liked heights, and it was all I could do to keep worming forward, one hand in front of the other, knees wrapped around the tree in shaky desperation. "Keep going," Dodger said from behind me. I stared down at the tree, focusing on the soles of Holly's white shoes in front of me. After forever, we made it across. A small, neat deck branched out from under the white door. The four of us sat silently for a few moments after the crossing. Dodger was the first to stand up. He walked over to the door and put his hand on the knob. I saw from the slump in his shoulders that something was wrong. "Locked," he whispered. I stood up and joined him. The knob, bronze and smooth, refused to turn.
"Some doors require a task or a price," Doc said.
Dodger and I both turned, then froze. Doc was holding Holly off the ground by the back of her neck. She struggled weakly, but I could see the venom in the crossing had left her exhausted. Dodger took a step towards Doc. "What are you—" Casually, with hardly any sign of effort, Doc tossed Holly off the deck. I saw a brief glimpse of her face as she went over the edge, and then she was gone, dropping to the valley below. "No!" Dodger screamed, charging at Doc. The movement was so quick, I didn't even see Doc's arm twitch, but I heard the crack of something breaking in Dodger. He dropped into a ball.
"The door only needs the one payment,"
Doc told me, advancing.
"You can come with me if you'd like."
I stood, frozen, unable to sink my mind to this new, horrible reality. Doc stopped in front of me, his face a scarred ruin with blind eyes.
"Well?"
he asked. My jaw moved, but I couldn't coax any words out into the world. Doc sighed.
"Not making a decision is its own decision."
He walked past me. The door opened with a loyal click.
"See you on the other side."
Then Doc was gone. I ran to Dodger. He was curled in the fetal position, clutching his chest. His breathing was harsh, wheezing. From over the edge of the deck, I saw several blue lights moving towards us. "We have to go," I said, trying to drag Dodger towards the door. He kept gasping like a fish torn from the water. We made it halfway to the door before the first light caught Dodger. I pulled with everything I had, but he was pinned by the glowing thing at the end of the branch. This one was a man, perfect like stone. I watched it take a bite from Dodger's calf. "Come on!" I begged, pulling Dodger's arm. "Please, come with me!" More lights were catching up to us, climbing up the deck. Each bright shape was... well, it was beautiful. They tugged at Dodger, took little bites from all over, and he never screamed. "Please," I said, voice breaking. "Please, please, please!" I looked down and saw Dodger staring up at me. "Go," he gasped. "Find him! Kill him! Go!" Dodger waved me away weakly. The bright blue lights were swarming over him, tearing off pieces as they went. I tried one last pull, and his arm came off at the shoulder where they'd been gnawing at it. That was all I could handle, and I ran, and I left him there. God forgive me, I left him there. I went through the door and closed it tight behind me. After the door was a staircase heading straight down. All I could hear was wind. The door at the bottom of the stairs was rimmed with ice. I didn't want to go any further, but I couldn't go back. "I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry I didn't walk out to the street that night. I'm sorry." There was frost on the knob. The narrow walls were cool to the touch, and the steps dusted with snow. Wooden stairs rippled below me, stopping at a faded white door. The wood was covered with scratches, trenches deep enough to show through the other side. When I looked, all I could see was endless white. I walked through the door into a world that was frozen in more ways than one. Thick drifts of powdered snow lay in knee-high piles. From the other side of the door, I'd heard wind roaring, but now that I was through, all was silent. All was still. Flickering crystals hung suspended in the air, snow caught mid-fall. The flakes burst and melted against my cheek as I passed through them. A curtain of ice and unmoving time. Doc was waiting for me a few yards from the door. He was sitting on a snow-covered stump, one of the only features in a cold, white wilderness. There were no other trees, no hills, no landmarks of any kind. The sky was a motionless canopy of furrowed gray. As I came closer, Doc stood up. His eyes were deteriorating quickly, venom scars shriveling the top half of his face. Blood-soaked bandages over both hands, clothes torn and damp with melting ice. Doc was a sorry sight. But he was grinning, and I noticed he walked across the surface of the snow, never sinking into the drifts.
"Howdy,"
Doc called out, giving me a wave that brushed snowflakes from the sky.
"What kept you?"
I charged at him, tripping and nearly falling through the drifts. The fear that kept me cowering behind the last door was burned away by the sight of Doc smiling. I could picture him throwing Holly off the deck, see Dodger's face as the glowing shapes bit into him, hear the last echo of Josh suffocating in the dark.
"I don't want to die here."
Doc and I collided. My shoulder took him in the midsection, and we both went down into the snow. I scrambled to my feet, kicking clouds of powder into the air. Doc was already up, waiting, still smiling. His stupid fucking murderer's grin. I didn't plan, couldn't even think straight. All I wanted to do was rip him into scrap meat. The first punch caught him square and heavy. I'm proud of that, at least, even if he was just humoring me. I never managed to touch him again. Doc caught my next swing easily, his movements too quick to follow. For a blind, broken man, he was nothing but confidence. For a moment, I stood as suspended as the air around us, trapped in Doc's grip. Then he moved, a vicious tugging motion, and pain like fireworks exploded from my shoulder with a thick pop. Doc stood over me as I curled up in the snow, my left arm useless.
"It's only a dislocation,"
he chided, bending over.
"Here, let me take your mind off the pain."
Doc reached down and touched my cheek. I tried to grab onto his wrist with my good arm, but it was useless. He swatted me aside, then knelt so that his knees kept me pinned. A new flare of pain from my shoulder nearly caused me to vomit. The bright spark of rage inside of my chest was gone, replaced with an animal panic. Doc's finger kept inching up my cheek, stopping to hover over my left eye. "Don't, no, don't!" I said, jamming the eye shut and trying to crawl away. "Please don't! Please stop! Get the fuck off me!"
"In a second, you won't even feel that little ache in your shoulder," Doc promised.
"Stop! Don't touch!" Smiling, Doc pressed his finger into my eye, and then kept pressing. I shrieked. The pain was overwhelming, bursting, ripping like a red-hot nail driven into the soft jelly of my eye. Every nerve in me was seizing up. I felt his finger move inside my eye socket. How was it possible to feel this much agony and live? Right then, I so very much wanted to die. I was thrashing, clutching at my face hard enough to leave nail marks on my cheeks and temple. But Doc was right. I'd forgotten all about my dislocated arm. I screamed for a very, very long time, convulsing, pushing my ruined socket into the snow. Doc must have gotten off of me at some point because I was free to twist and crawl to my heart's content. Eventually, my screams trailed off into whispers, and I was still. Doc stood near me, watching.
"Did you get it all out of your system?" he asked. "Or should I take the other eye?"
"No!" I shouted. "No! Please, no, no, no more!" Shock was setting in, dulling the jagged edges, but the pain was still crippling. Doc stepped towards me, and I jerked back. The only thing louder than the agony was the fear of how else he might hurt me. Doc stopped.
"You're sure? If I took the other eye, we could match. Blind buddies on a long and unusual journey."
I was silent.
"Fine,"
Doc said, dragging me to my feet. It hurt terribly, like walking through a cloud of wasps, but to my surprise, I was able to stand.
"We're not quite done yet. If you stop moving, if you take another swing at me, or if I just feel like it, you'll live the rest of your life in the dark."
I didn't argue. The fight was out of me. My left arm dangled limply, and every jostle came with a sick crunch. The world looked closer, more claustrophobic through one eye.
"Come on,"
Doc said, walking away. I turned to follow and noticed a new red door standing alone in the snow. Doc opened it and went through. I hesitated, but only for a moment. It was a beautiful day on the other side. We stood on a busy city street on a warm, sunny morning. The sky looked modern, but I didn't recognize any of the buildings. Everywhere there were cars, people, signs of life. But just like how the snow hung in the air, the city was frozen, trapped in a single moment of time. Nothing moved. Perfect silence.
"The house, you probably figured it out,"
Doc told me, walking down the motionless street.
"But it has far more than 100 rooms. It's everywhere, endless, weaving like veins through the body of reality. And the house touches not just everywhere, but also every when. The past, the future, every possible past and future. Each has its own cozy room somewhere in the house."
I followed Doc from a wary distance. As we drew closer to a crowd of frozen people on the sidewalk, I felt my pulse quicken. Each face was a featureless blur, just like the children in the forest. It was like their personalities, their identities, were wiped away into nothing more than a smudge. "Where are we?" I asked, walking in the street, more comfortable around the unmoving cars than the faceless people. Doc shrugged.
"I can't remember the name of the city. I think this is the past. Or is it the future?"
He turned back to me and flashed his slasher grin.
"You know that feeling when you move from one room into another and forget what you're doing? I get that a lot."
We walked on through the city. Even the clouds above us were stuck in time, massive islands of white pinned to a blue background. I stopped. There was something above us, just out of sight. I was certain.
"I was wondering how long it would take you to notice,"
Doc said, climbing onto the hood of a car and making himself comfortable. "What's up there?" I asked. Doc ignored me.
"It's late, or maybe early. She's never consistent, which is what I love about her."
"Who are you talking about?" Doc continued to ignore me. I felt an ember of the old anger begin to burn again. I held on to it, but kept it hidden.
"Holly had it right,"
Doc continued.
"when she compared the way the house reacted to us, unwelcome visitors, to how a body attacks germs. The house is alive, Aaron, and she is perfect. But she is also sick. That sickness has made her wild and troubled, confused, prone to fits. We've been traveling this whole time through the dying body of a mad god."
"Okay," I said, sitting on a nearby curb, suddenly very tired. Whatever you say. Doc laughed.
You don't believe me? After everything you've seen?
Fatigue was beginning to make me numb. I believe you. Body of a dying god, infinite rooms, crossing space and time, yada yada. I'm just not sure if I care. Doc's smile was gone. For maybe the first time, I saw behind his careful mask. He was angry.
You don't care?
He asked. I shook my head. What does it change? Doc stared at me. After a few moments, I couldn't help but squirm.
Do you have any idea of the roads I've walked, the worlds I've seen, the price I've paid to see them?
Doc whispered. His smile snapped back.
She asks so much, has terrible needs, but the rewards are just aces, bud, like you wouldn't believe. For example, you see time like a river, don't you? A current that only flows in one direction. The truth is, time is an ocean with conflicting tides, and the house, she can teach you how to swim. Look up!
I jerked my head up towards the sky fast enough that whips of pain shot through my shoulder and face. There was a humming in the world, the heavy sense of things about to shift. I saw a dark pinprick appear against the blue above, covered quickly by a drifting cloud. The clouds were moving. Time was flowing, only for a few seconds, and then everything froze again. I kept staring up at the dark spot in the sky. When my gaze fell back to earth, I yelled and scrambled back, scraping my hands against the rough sidewalk. All of the frozen, featureless people had turned their blank faces towards me.
Do you care yet? Doc asked. Or should I let a few more moments pass through my fingers? I wonder what will happen. Let's see. I felt the hum again, like a pendulum beginning to swing. The faces began to move towards me, hesitantly. They had no features to read, but somehow I knew they weren't happy to have me there. Without looking, I could feel the dark spot in the sky growing closer. I stood up and began to move towards the center of the street. Time froze again. One of the faceless people was only a few feet away, reaching towards me. Doc was walking down the sidewalk. You should run, he suggested. I did. All around me, the world shuddered to life. Time moved in skips and pauses. I sprinted as fast as I could down the center line. Cars jolted forward, then froze on either side of me, then moved again. I ran, and the faceless pursued. There was no more hesitancy in the blurred expressions. There was now an unseen hate. They would lurch towards me with each pendulum swing, coming closer before time stopped again. It was a stop-motion chase, punctuated by moments of snarling anger from the crowd, cut with absolute silence. Stop, go, stop, go. The clock of the world advanced with grinding ticks. Doc was toying with me, I was sure of it. Pain and exhaustion slowed me to a wheezing, terrified stumble, but I was always just barely able to avoid the grasping hands all around me. Above, I knew the dark thing was getting closer, falling with a strange whistle every time it moved. The sound was sharp, threatening, yet familiar, like a tune I'd heard before. I ran until the city began to fall apart around me. Structures weren't destroyed or damaged. It was more like someone forgot to finish building. I ran until I threw up, and then farther still. A nameless dread bit at my heels with each step, a certainty that I did not want to be caught by the faceless things who stayed stuck in time like amber. The city fell away, and I ran into a rolling expanse of green fields and hills. At the top of the first hill, I gasped. Below were wide fields, empty except for millions of doors. They were every color and shape,
covering the ground, climbing into the sky, each frame standing without walls, doors like stars stretching out past the horizon. I kept running until my vision grew blurry, and then I turned around. I was not being followed. Wheezing, I dropped to the ground and sat gasping for air. Doc got next to me without making a noise. He leaned over until his shadow blocked the sun.
"Do you care yet?"
he asked. I nodded weakly.
"Get up then,"
Doc said. We walked along the road surrounded by floating doors. They seemed to go on forever. I wondered if one of them could take me out of this place, if it could take me home. I tried to calm down and drain the adrenaline still pumping from the chase. Breathing deeply, I tried to feel if any of the doors... Honestly, I don't know what the hell I was trying to sense. Maybe I wanted to use the Force? Who knows?
"Pick one,"
Doc told me, grinning. Could he read my mind? I continued to walk, my one remaining eye closed. There was a mental tug as I passed a tall yellow door a few feet from the road. We stood at the threshold for a moment, and then Doc made me go through first. The first thing I noticed was the tinkling of wind chimes. I was in a sunshine-drenched yard attached to a cozy ranch house with a wraparound porch. The chimes were hanging outside, swaying in the breeze. A woman opened the door. She was wearing a blue sundress.
"This isn't where we're supposed to be,"
Doc barked from behind me.
"This isn't right."
I felt a yank, and then I was being dragged back through the door. The last thing I saw was the woman looking up. I recognized her. Doc's wife. He slammed the door once I was through. Doc stood staring at the door. His mask had slipped again, and I saw he was shaking, not afraid, but furious.
"She always does this," he said. "She pushes me, gets under my skin."
"Your wife?" I asked. For a second, I thought Doc was going to hurt me again, but he just started walking away.
"I'll pick the fucking door," he said.
We came out on a beach shrouded in fog and snow. More fucking snow. "Where are we going?" I asked. Doc was forging ahead, leaving a trail through sand and snow. The tide broke against the shore, great floats of ice cracking with each wave. Gray mist and clouds cut visibility down to next to nothing, but I could see the shadows moving over the water, forms the size of skyscrapers, dark spots walking through the ocean. It put a chill in me to look at them, even obscured. The old fear, terror of the unknown and of things that did not belong. They seemed to be waiting. Doc turned back.
"We're almost done. I know it hurts. Don't stop now."
I sat down, wincing at the cold. "I'm done, though. If you're gonna kill me, just do it." Sighing, Doc walked back and sat down next to me. We watched the massive creatures in the fog and listened to the crash of half-frozen waves.
"This is as good a place as any, I guess," Doc said. "It's been a hell of a run, eh?"
I thought of the feeling of my eye popping in its socket. Dodger's face, Holly's face, Josh's last words. "Why'd you do all of this?" I asked. "Why'd you fucking have to do this to us?" Doc paused before replying.
"A part of me is sorry. Please understand that. But the house requires sacrifice. Them's the breaks. She needs us, you, and I'm her caretaker. So what other options do I have?"
Doc turned towards me, his dead eyes almost sad.
"She didn't trust me anymore. Did you know that? None of her nurses did either. Bunch of worrywarts. They don't think I'm competent enough to take care of her, that I'm starting to crack. But I'm still steady."
He giggled. The shadows in the mist were moving closer. I saw, with rising fucking alarm, that the tide was washing up closer and closer with each wave. The water was rising. Or maybe we were sinking? I wondered how cold the ocean would be and what might be in it.
"I'm glad it's you here for this," Doc said. "I promised her I'd let her choose, either me or someone better. Luckily, you're not better. Josh was kinder, Dodger cleverer, and Holly was as brave as the three of you soggy blankets put together. Yet here you are, last man standing, sitting, whatever you are."
He looked out over the water.
"When the tide comes, they'll take you. It'll only hurt for a moment."
I was breathing hard. I've always feared deep water, but something Doc said stuck with me. She didn't trust me. Starting to crack. I promised I'd let her choose.
Why doesn't she trust you?" I whispered. "Don't worry about it,"
Doc replied. I was staring at him, gears in my mind finally beginning to click. The house needs someone calm, doesn't she? Someone steady? Every time someone was angry or afraid, that's when we were in danger.
"I did tell you all to relax, didn't I?" Doc muttered. "Not my fault you weren't good enough."
"Are you?" I asked, the seed of a desperate plan taking root. "What makes you special? Why should you take care of her?" Doc pinned me with his blind stare.
"You have no idea, no frame for understanding what I've given up to be here, the ledger I've paid, the cost." A woman in a blue sundress, Doc holding the hand of his wife as they waited on a beach.
"What happened to your wife, Doc?" I asked. He never stopped staring. The tide was already brushing against our feet.
"You don't get to ask about her,"
he replied. His mask was slipping again. He was angry. "Did you give her up? Did you give her to the house?" I continued. Doc stood up.
"You're about to die here, Aaron, and you'll die ugly."
I also got to my feet. The water rolled back in, knee-high. "Did she trust you? Did she know what you were doing?"
"Stop talking,"
Doc said, walking towards me. I began to backpedal, trying to move us towards the ocean. "She didn't know, did she? Your wife."
"You don't know the first thing about it," Doc growled. "Not the first fucking thing!"
"But I can guess," I said, nearly slipping as the tide broke against my waist, chunks of ice nearly bowling me over. "The house has been dropping hints, hasn't it? Your picture in the gallery, your video in the theater. They were all about your wife. They were all about the loss of your wife. You told us before that you visited the house many times with many people, exploring, recording. That's something you two did together, right? How many trips did you take before you decided to give her to the house?" I kept forgetting how fast Doc could move. His grin was gone, his little mask pulled away. Teeth bared, face tight with rage and hate. He was on me before I could run.
"You don't get to talk about her!"
Doc spat, hands around my throat. I was saved by the water, the waves slamming into both of us, knocking Doc away and dragging us out into the ocean. My last glimpse of Doc was him swimming toward me like a shark, screaming, desperate to hurt me. The sea was rough, churning with whitecaps and ice. Before Doc could reach me, I saw him go under like he was plucked from below. I felt a tug and took a last frantic breath. Then I was underwater in the cold and dark. I sensed massive things moving around me. I kept waiting for a hand or tentacle or jaw to find me, but I realized I wasn't afraid to die. Well, okay, I was scared shitless, but that was balanced by a new calm. At least I knew everything was over, and if I died there in the freezing water, trolling Doc as my final act felt like a fitting curtain call on the whole fucked up experience. But I didn't die. The darkness closed in on me as my air ran out and I lost consciousness. I awoke washed up on a different beach, one with warm sand and clear skies. My first few minutes on shore were spent vomiting up a really excessive amount of seawater. But when I was finally able to stand, I saw that the beach was stunningly beautiful. Towering cliffs overlooked the shoreline. I saw a paved path winding its way up the ridge. Having not a hell of a lot else to do, I started walking. The sunshine was clean and welcoming. There was a house on top of the cliff. I recognized it as Doc's house, as the house. Bright gardens surrounded the property. I heard the lethargic buzz of bees. The smell of flowers was overwhelming, fresh as a sunrise. I took in an entire spring with each breath. I gave real consideration to the possibility that I may have died and gone to literal heaven. But then I noticed the people tending the gardens. They were dressed all in white. The one nearest me looked up from the flowers they were pruning, and the figure's face was a featureless smudge. "Oh, for fuck's actual fucking sake," I muttered, turning to run back down the path. "Took you long enough?" A familiar voice called out. I froze. One of the things in white was walking towards me, peeling off gardening gloves. He had a blur for a face, but I still somehow recognized him. Maybe it was his voice or his frame or the way he moved or all of it put together. "Hey, Josh," I whispered. Josh reached out his hand. I gave him a tentative shake. "The fuck?" I asked. Even without a mouth, I could tell Josh smiled. "Kind of a trip, isn't it?" he said. I nodded. "Also, you're dead." "Yup. She collects people who die in the house. Those who can accept their new normal, they come here. Those who can't, you probably met them already." "Who is she?" I asked. Josh pointed to a place further down the cliff. A woman sat in a wheelchair at the edge overlooking the beach below. Even from a distance, I could see that she was much, much larger than a person had any right to be. "She is the house, and the house is her," Josh told me. "I don't know her name. In all my time here, I've never been able to find it. I think she's had many names, but even she seems to have forgotten them. She's dying, Aaron. She's been dying for a long, long time. We try to keep her comfortable. As she dies, she sleeps, and when she sleeps, she dreams. Her dreams have a habit of becoming real, escaping from the house and going their own way. Her nightmares are... Well, we try to keep her calm and her dreams peaceful. That's why the house needs a steady caretaker, someone who can keep their head in a crisis. The house and the dreamer are one and the same. Take care of the house and you protect the dreamer. And we don't want her to have troubled dreams, and we absolutely do not want her to wake up." I stared at the woman in the wheelchair. She was wrapped in sweaters and blankets and had long silver hair. Her head was slumped to her shoulder. I wondered what she was dreaming of right then. "What happens if she wakes up?" I asked. Josh shrugged. "We're not sure. Nothing good. Some of us fear that the whole world, reality, is all part of her dying dream. And that's why we need you to take care of the house, Aaron. What do you say?" I chewed at my lip, not ready to answer. "You said before, in all my time here. Josh, you've only been dead for a couple of days." He laughed. "I've been here much longer than that. You've seen that time works differently here." "How long have I been in here?" I asked. "Quite a while," Josh replied. "You're avoiding my question, though. Doc went native on us, and the house needs a caretaker. You're the only option at this point. Sorry." "What would I need to do?" Josh sighed. "There's a book in the house, your house, that explains everything. I'll be honest, you won't like it.
but I promise it is necessary. I tried to focus on the good things, the warm sun, the ocean air. What if I say no? No one can force you to take this burden, but I truly hope you do. It's a terrible responsibility, but there are certain rewards, Josh said. I don't want them. I don't want any of this. I know, he said. We stood together for a long moment listening to the waves. I looked around the garden. Dozens of faceless workers in white were standing, watching us, waiting. I recognized a few in the crowd. There was a blonde, short and lithe, standing next to a tall man. They were holding hands. That made me smile. One of the figures seemed fixated on me in particular. He had tattered gray hair, and I didn't need to see his face to know he was scowling. I waved. So, what's the verdict? Josh asked. I guess I don't have much choice, I replied. I'll agree on one condition. How do I get the fuck back to the real world? Josh smiled and pointed towards the front door of the house. I took one last look at the woman on the cliff. And then I walked along the garden path, went through the door, and found myself back where everything began, standing in Doc's house. My house. I found the book Josh mentioned in the library. It was the Black Book, the one Doc warned us not to read. Everything about the house is here. Its history, its needs. There are entries from every caretaker who has ever watched over the house and the dreamer. Diaries, pages and pages of attempts to map the rooms in the house, to classify the inhabitants that live there, and to track the things that get out. Most days it feels like it's all too much, too difficult, and would require me to cross lines that can't ever be redrawn. I started writing down an entry about my first trip through the house. I want to make sure that there's a record of what happened to Josh, Dodger, and Holly, that anyone who reads the book, even if it's just future caretakers, knows that they were all good people put in a terrible situation, who did the best they could. I'm glad some echo of them lives on. It's hard to get used to being back. I find myself checking the doors and windows multiple times a day, half convinced I'm still stuck. But this feels real, like I'm out, like I'm living. I don't know. There's this gravity to doors in this house, especially the blue one on the second floor. I understand why Doc kept going back to explore the rooms. But I'm not ready to take another trip. I'm not sure if I'll ever be ready, honestly. If I go, I might not find my way back to the real world ever again. Though, if Josh is right, and everything's only part of the uneasy dream of some dying god, then maybe there's no such thing as the real world.
You've been listening to The House with 100 Doors by Travis Brown. Travis Brown is an author that lives in Maryland. He has several short story collections out with Velux Books and frequently contributes to true crime, horror, and mystery podcasts. Beyond that, he enjoys spending time with his fiancée and their deeply spoiled Weimaraner, Parker. Well, listeners, after 100 rooms of blurred faces, venomous spiders, staring trees, nauseating stars, pokings, proddings, meltings, and an honest-to-God degloving, I think this is a Horror Hill episode for the ages, my friends. And while I am absolutely beat and ready to kick back with a nice scotch, I'm glad we took this trip. In fact, I really need to raise this glass to Travis Brown. Travis, thanks for a hell of a story, and I encourage all of you listening to go check out his other work. And now, I release you back to the myriad nightmares, and joys, I suppose, of the holiday season. Regardless of what this time of year means to you, which holiday you celebrate or not, May your remaining season proceed with as little friction as possible. After all, I need to make sure that you come back here next week for more Horror Hill, right? Until then, friends, stay spooky. You've been listening to the Horror Hill podcast, a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Tonight's episode was hosted, narrated, scored, and finalized by yours truly, Erik Peabody. Additional music by Nikki McSorley. Got a terrifying tale of your own that you'd like performed? Email it to us at submissions@simplyscarypodcast.com to have your work considered for future production. Note that any writing utilizing artificial intelligence is ineligible. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, why not help us spread our dark presence online? You can follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on social media, and upvote, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon if you're listening to this on YouTube. It helps us out a lot, and also keeps you up to date on new episodes. If you'd like access to uninterrupted horror, free of ads and these annoying bookend segments, might I recommend signing up to be a patron? You'll get access to hundreds of episodes of this show, as well as everything from the other programs in the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights cabal. That means all of Scary Stories Told in the Dark, Drew Blood's Dark Tales, and more. It's a veritable smorgasbord of horrific delights. Head to chillingtalesfordarknights.com to get started. If you're looking for someone to narrate or handle audio production for your own personal project, I just so happen to know a guy. Email me at erikpeabodyvoice@gmail.com. That's ErikPeabodyvoice@gmail.com, and we can talk details. If darkness is what you're after, listener, your search is over. Yet, let it be known, you haven't found the darkness. The darkness has found you.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.